Hello, my name is Nathan LaVoie. I'm an undergraduate engineering student at the University of Idaho, and my project is entitled Fast Fourier Transformation-Based Micromechanical Homogenization of Inconel 718 Manufactured by Selective Laser Melting. This material is based on work supported by the U.S. Department of Energy in collaboration with Dr. Aitor Cruzado, who is a research professor at the Texas A&M, as well as with help from the Aerospace Corporation. Inconel 718 is a polycrystalline superalloy used primarily in aeronautic engine components. This precipitation hardening nickel chromium alloy is desirable for aerospace applications because it is characterized in having good tensile, fatigue, creep, and rupture strength at temperatures up to 750 degrees Celsius. However, Inconel 718's mechanical properties vary greatly depending on its underlying microstructure, ranging grain size, orientation, manufacturing technique, and secondary composites make Inconel 718 hard to predict. When dealing with such variable substances, a method must be derived for deriving mechanical properties. The method used to manufacture Inconel 718 also changes its mechanical properties. Rote manufacturing is when a metal is rolled into strips. The process of thinning the metal into strips causes a unique grain pattern, forming a high tensile yet brittle structure. Inconel 718 is an additive manufacturing process that uses a bed of powder and a highly precise heat source to fuse the powder together. This printing process results in a material with increased tensile strength and ductility. Python was used to create a program that took into account Inconel 718's underlying material properties as well as specified microstructures, including grain size, orientation, and arrangement. The program used these values as well as underlying constants and solved millions of calculations based on crystal plasticity, resolved shear stress, self-hardening, and latent hardening models to simulate Inconel 718 under stress. The main algorithm was based around a fast Fourier transformation. Each operation was separated into its own subroutine so that the algorithms could be used and adapted in different combinations. The results were then transferred into the MATLAB to create stress strain curves and grain size graphs. The data was then compared to experimentally tested Inconel 718 samples with comparable grain sizes. The Python data was also imported into ParaView to create, where the microstructure data was used to create statistical volume element, SVEs, to visualize the crystalline grain structure. The statistical volume element takes into account the variability in microstructure, where a typical representative volume element assumes that the average value for each grain. This can be seen in the variability of the model crystal. So you can see that there's wide ranging and wide ranging in crystal sizes and orientations and overall sizes and shapes. The grain size also has an effect, and you can see as you increase the average grain size of the crystal, the average grain inside the image becomes larger, and there are few of them because they are on average a larger crystal. Stress strain curves were also created for each crystal to simulating using the Python data. Modeled Inconel 718 crystals with the same relative grain size had a very high correlation. You can see this here with the red and green lines on each graph. In the first three graphs, you can see that the simulated crystals inside of each grain structure, which are 22, 51, and 77, had a very high correlation to each other. This means that the model has excellent precision when creating the grains. To look at the accuracy of the created model, model crystals need to be compared to the digitalized data from experimental results. This can be seen with the experimental. Inside of each one of these, the 22, the 51, and the 77, the experimental data was gathered from an actual sample of Inconel 718, which has a similar grain size. So these are each compared to and localized to their own average grain size. In the 22 and the 77 average micrometer crystals, there was a high correlation between the elastic region, which can be seen here, a lower correlation at the yield point, which is here. You can see it starts to slip away from the experimental data. A moderate correlation at the strain hardening region, which can be seen here and here. Pretty close, but it can definitely get closer. And a low correlation at the necking and fracture point because we haven't taken into account that part of the mechanical properties yet. In the 51 micrometer crystal, you can see the only difference is that there's a very high correlation at the yield point as well, meaning that this is a very, very well modeled, but it can still be better. It can still have a higher correlation. The model Inconel 718 crystals have a moderate overall correlation between the experimental data, and this will be optimized later. The simulations also showed a correlation between grain size and a weakened reaction to stress, which is consistent with experimental results. You can see that 22 down to 51 down to 77 under the same conditions, it gets weaker and weaker as the stress increases. Moving forward, the research will continue to focus on the development of the SBE model. The model needs to be reverse optimized in order to fit the FFT data, which is the simulated data, to the experimental data from true crystals. Optimizing this and fitting the data to the experimental data will prove that we are getting closer and closer and creating an actual model of actual Inconel 718. In addition, subroutines need to be added to introduce voids and model damaging to incorporate necking and fracturing. That is not even taken into account because it just keeps on going straight. But with the incorporation of subroutines, that would fit the model better. But as currently, our main focus was grain size and the selective laser melting nature. Here are my citations, and thank you very much for listening.